Hello, welcome to Task and Purpose First Squad. This format is going to be a little bit more long-winded. We're going to go through an article and we're going to talk about something that's happening in the Marine Corps currently that I've been hearing about recently, how they're doing a massive restructuring to the U.S. Marine Corps. And you see this with, they're getting the M27 IAR rifle, they're getting a lot of new toys like silencer, suppressors, whatever you want to call it. And these changes are a part of a bigger shift that's happening at the Marines right now. If we look at this article for the Center for Strategic and International Studies, they talk about some of these changes. So they're going to be shutting down 7 different MOSs currently, which includes no more tanks for the Marines. So M1 Abrams, you can wave goodbye to that. There's also no more artillery, no more military police, which I don't know what you're going to do with the Marine Corps now that there's no more police to make sure that they behave. When you get rid of all these jobs, the reason I think that they're doing this is because they want to make budget for things in the future that they think are going to be more important to the Marines. So they don't see themselves as needing heavy armor anymore. That's going to be all the U.S. Army's job. They're going to take care of the heavy armor brigades. And by freeing up these funds, it's going to let them do things like focus on their infantry. And I'll give you just like a brief overview of what they say they want to do. They want to kind of turn the Marine infantry into special forces on their own. So forget MARSOC, just your regular infantry grunt at the Marines are going to be like special forces. That's their goal. They kind of want to make things smaller so that they can send their troops out on to islands in the Southeast Pacific and to counter China. Now, I'm no, foreign policy expert, but I know that that's where they see the future of conflicts are going to be. They're forgetting about terrorism is in the past. The war that I was in, the way that we fought, that is in the past. They don't want to fight that anymore. They realize that by focusing on developing tactics, developing weapons, organizing basically around defeating this one enemy of terrorism, they've opened up a kind of blind spot in the U.S. military where they are no longer equipped or ready to fight a near-peer challenge, or whatever the next war is going to end up looking like. They're not ready for it. So this is part of the reason why they're cutting 7 MOSs in the future, getting rid of these jobs. So these Marines are going to be let go, or they're going to have to reclass. So it says here, Marines in several jobs will need to move into new fields or even other branches of the military. Can you imagine that? Marines having to go serve in another branch. You go through Marine boot camp and now you're going to go in the Air Force. They will hate it. As the service begins its first phase of ending or curbing long-standing missions in a force-wide reorganization to take on new threats. The Marine Corps has released instructions to more than 1,300. This is going to affect 1,300 enlisted personnel and officers whose MOS are in there, and they're planning on making this change by 2030. So it's not going to happen immediately. Things don't happen overnight in the military. It's not like you just wake up, wait, where'd our tanks go? No, it's going to take like 10 years. But it's interesting to see that that's the direction they're going in. Get rid of artillery, get rid of tanks, and these jobs that are kind of already done by the Army but better. So what can the Marines do better than the Army? They can do, infantry that can be deployed anywhere, on ships, on little islands all over the place. That's what they're banking on. And so the criticism of that is people saying, well, you got 18-year-old Marines that are going to be going into the infantry, and people that are 18 are not necessarily mature enough to take on the responsibilities of special forces, because a lot of times they're handling situations that could turn into a global conflict if they're not careful. So you put out a couple of 18-year-old Marines and maybe some Lance Corporals, 22 years old, and you're expecting them to operate on their own without much oversight. That's the criticism of this plan. Commandant General David Berger first announced in March that the Marine Corps will eventually stop operating tanks, cut 3 infantry battalions, and shed 7% of overall force over the next decade. The cost saving will be used to pay for high-tech equipment. Leaders say Marines will need to counter China, Russia, Iran, and others. So that's right there. That's the crux of it, that they're putting these funds, it's not like they're cutting this and then not reinvesting it. They're taking those funds and they're just reallocating it somewhere else. We're not saying that a tank or brigading company isn't of value, Smith told military.com. Tanks were a massive value in the past. I used them in and around Ramadi and in and around Fallujah in Iraq. They paid their dues in blood, right? These are Marine warriors from the Korean War to now. But the Marine Corps must reorganize to remain relevant. And he added, it's just for the future fight. Those MOSs are of less value than the things that we need most, such as long-range precision fire. Marine Administrative Message 302-20 lays out several options for the personnel whose MOSs are closing or cutting billets, including lateral moves, early retirement options. That'd be nice. You got 3 years left on that contract, and they're like, you know what? Why don't you take that early retirement? I'd take it. The use of involuntary tools may also be used as necessary. Let's see what else we got here. Anything else relevant? No one will be forced out because of the changes. It's intentionally drawn out over time so we can make the right decision. So they're not going to be pushing people out of tanks and artillery tomorrow. They're giving enough time that people would naturally have not re-upped in those positions. They're going to let it naturally phase out. Let's see what we're looking at here. Manpower force shaping in support of force design phase 1. So they're moving on phase 1 with this. Yeah, let's see if we can't find some about the strategy behind this now. So when we look at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, this website and this report is more geared towards some of the thinking behind these changes that are happening. So we can look at some of the key takeaways. First of all, General Berger, he's the main guy behind these changes. New guidance aims to restore the Marine Corps to its naval roots after 2 decades of operations ashore, invest in capabilities focused on great power conflict in the Pacific, and divest unneeded forces. So that is what's happening here. The 2 decades of operations ashore, they're talking right here about basically the war on terror, where the Marine Corps was used as ground forces in Iraq and Afghanistan for extended periods of time. You know, the Marines have said lost some of their original purpose, which is to do amphibious assaults. And you see that in their Marines haven't been investing a ton until recently into finding new amphibious vehicles. We did a video on the amphibious vehicle, but it's interesting to see how they're worried about the shore conflict, where they're basically betting that surface to like Tomahawk missiles, cruise missiles from China and potential enemies will stop a amphibious assault in its tracks. So if you can't attack the enemy beaches in that way, then it's worth more to invest in destroying those capabilities so that they don't have to face a contested beach landing. They're basically, the Marines are betting they're not going to have to face a contested beach landing because they're going to need to hammer that beach out with long-range artillery and missiles and combined operations from the Air Force and the Army to clear that beach ahead of the landing. So it's interesting to think about that. Like, where do you put your money? Do you invest in a shore? Do you invest in a, water to shore vehicle like the AMV, which can transport troops safely to shore, and then they have a lot of firepower? Or do you want to invest that money elsewhere? It's these are huge decisions that they have to make in conjunction with their procurement teams who need to be honest with them and tell them, this is what we can really do for this budget. So it's going to be interesting to see if this is a huge bet that they're making, and it's made based on the data that they have that we don't have, but the data they have is telling them that this is the right direction to go in. So despite a continuing high operation tempo, the Marine Corps is pursuing modernization over expanding force structure. That's what it came down to. Is they had to make a choice between should we place our bets on making the military more modern, giving the technology, better equipment, better training, or do we want to just make this thing bigger? And sometimes you don't, if you expand something, you don't, it's called like diminishing returns. You could have an army of 4 billion soldiers, but if they're all armed with rocks and stones, then it's not really going to beat a military force of even a million soldiers in that hypothetical situation of 4 billion versus a million. So the ground forces would gain long-range precision fire, but give up 3 infantry battalions, tanks, and some counterinsurgency capabilities. Most artillery would convert from cannon to missile units. UAVs would increase in number, but the Marine Corps is far behind the Air Force in regards to the UAV development, so they're going to want to up their UAV. The amphibious fleet will include large numbers of light amphibious warships, LAWs. These will provide more distributed capabilities that can implement the Marine Corps' intention to be a stand-in force that can operate inside an adversary's defensive bubble. That's what they've been talking about. The stand-in force is these special forces types infantry units that, okay, infantry is getting smaller, but they're going to be a stand-in force that can be sent in advance onto islands already, strategic areas in the South Pacific where they want these units to be able to hold their own, be more independent. The trade-off is, because of the LAW's small size, they will not be able to support the customary level of global forward deployments, which may decline as a result. LAWs, I think what they're talking about here, if I'm not wrong, is the new amphibious vehicle. Let's get that full light amphibious warship. Oh, you know what? No, I know what this is. Light amphibious warships they're not like the AA. They're not an amphibious landing craft. They're a decent sized ship. That's right. So this is the strategy. They want to fill these vehicles, these vessels with troops, vehicles, and they bring these close to shore because, again, they're not expecting a contested landing. These ships are not, they can't defend themselves against they wouldn't be able to pull this up to a beach and dock and let tanks off under fire. This is a vehicle that is meant to just transport a fairly large amount. The old one held 13 at most. The new ones right here, this is talking about holding maybe 8 soldiers. So these are different amphibious vehicles that the Marines would load up. This is a cool one. It's massive, but they ended up not going with this one. They canceled this project. It was too expensive, too massive. A lot of people thought we should go in this direction, holding 13 Marines. It's basically like an upgraded version of this vehicle, which has been around since Vietnam War. This is the approach. These ships come up, they dock on the shore, no one's getting shot at here. They're just unloading the crafts onto strategic islands. The restructuring has been criticized for focusing too much on maritime campaign in the Western Pacific, ignoring other global conflicts and relying on unproven operational concepts. Again, that's why I've been talking about this approach like it's a bet, because it's anything that goes into the realm of we haven't done this before whatsoever, we don't know what this is going to look like, it's a bet. But those a lot of times pay off great. Not so long ago, the Marine Corps had talked about expanding the active duty force to just under 200,000. That level would have allowed the Marine Corps to build new capabilities without sacrificing the old. However, flat budgets required some trade-offs. Don't they always? The projection in 2021 budget shows a small decrease compared to 2020. However, General Berger said, if provided the opportunity to secure additional dollars in exchange for force structure, I'm prepared to do so. I want to know what you guys think about this, because I've been following it on and off for the last 2 years, and it's been curious to see. You keep hearing about how they're going to do this restructure of the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps is always very, very against change. They're for tradition. So to see them make these massive changes aren't so hard, because they're focusing the Marine Corps back to its original job of amphibious When General Berger became Commandant, he issued planning guidance with 4 major themes to reestablish the Marine Corps naval routes after years of operations ashore in Iraq and Afghanistan, to build structure and weapons for great power conflict, particularly in the Pacific, eliminate legacy capabilities that didn't fit with the new concept, and to maintain a high level of individual warfighting prowess. These themes were consistent with the National Defense Strategy and previously published marine concepts such as expeditionary, advanced base operations. The marine concepts envision a shift to distributed operations, and the Marine Corps contributing to sea control in a naval campaign through shore-based aircraft fires. Unlike the Navy's proposed restructuring, General Berger stated, "I seek no additional resources for this effort." Thus, the restructure cuts many force elements to create savings to acquire new capabilities. Implementation will be a 10-year effort through some changes such as retirement of tanks have taken place immediately. The document and General Berger's statements since its issuance emphasize that this is an ongoing process with continued experimentation and wargaming. Here's what's happening with the infantry. The cut of 3 infantry battalions appears to be a bill payer. The press release says that the remaining battalions will be more mobile and reportedly commando-like. So this is what we're getting. I was mentioning in the beginning of the video how commando-like, like special forces-like. I think this is part of the reason why the Marines are switched to the M27 IAR rifle to replace most of their M4s and to replace most of their M249s. Because the M249, the SAW, it's heavy, it makes them less mobile. This proposed restructuring has met with both support and doubts. Support comes from strategists who see China as the primary threat and would focus defense efforts tightly on that adversary. They endorse the new technologies and operational concepts. Doubt arises from 5 primary concerns. The focus on China downplays the possibilities of conflicts elsewhere. The military, I guess, has a problem of tunnel vision, where they get sighted in on one adversary and then they try to just focus on that. So they don't, I guess, want to see the same problem where the military focused on terrorism too much while forgetting China. Now they're worried they're going to focus too much on China and forget terrorism. The new warfighting concepts are unproven. The structure assumes that in a conflict with China, Marine forces would move into the Chinese defensive bubble, survive, and be supported. That briefs well, but may not work in contested environments where logistics need to move forward continuously and adversary firepower can strike isolated marine outposts. So that's a good point. If they're restructuring so that they can put isolated marine units within the defensive bubble of China, then what if China is able to just wipe those bubbles out, like what happened in Wanat in Afghanistan, where the concept there was, let's move all of our forces out away from the big bases, put them on remote outposts within the insurgents' defensive bubble. And then what happened is you end up with regular infantry units out where probably it should be special forces units. They're doing a job that maybe they weren't ready for or equipped for, and then you see them get overrun. So would we have a situation here where they get overrun? Conflicts against China and Russia are likely to operate in the gray zone and are not high intensity and kinetic. The new force design is not well suited for these demands because of reductions to counterinsurgency capabilities and the reorientation of training to focus exclusively on high-end fight. That's a good point. I guess they're saying here that there's little, basically, if there was a conflict with China or Russia, that's game over, man. That's the end anyway. It would be nukes, it would be the end anyway. So why develop a force that is designed to fight a fight that would only last a week anyway? Why not design your force to be ready for the kind of conflicts that are realistically going to happen? So that's a good point. All warfighting requires close-in firepower. The new structure focuses on long-range precision fire, but the need for close-in fires, including tank and cannon artillery, has not gone away. In fact, if you look at engagements, it's interesting to see, since World War II, to today, basically you go way back, and I'm doing a video on optics that showcases kind of this issue of proximity to the enemy, where if you go way back in 1800s, you had to get really close to fight because the weapons weren't accurate. You got muskets, then they get rifled, so you could fight a little further away, and you could disperse your troops more. Then you go forward a little bit more, World War I, the fighting gets close again because the artillery forces units to get close in, otherwise they're just going to get wiped out. You got to put their lines closer. Then after World War I, things stay close because you got airplanes overhead, so if you're too far away from the enemy, that air power is just going to wipe you out. So now they're talking again about maybe a shift where it would go back to being a little bit longer range. That's why the Army is talking about getting a 6.8 millimeter to be able to shoot a little further out. Optics are now so advanced that they could take advantage of engagements at 1,000 meters. Easy, whereas before 300 meters was the best your average rifleman could do. So they're thinking, is it going to happen again where because of drones and UAV attacks, are we going to see our units fighting further out again? So that's kind of that's a brief overview of some of the changes that are happening at the Marine Corps, some of the criticism against these changes. I'll be really curious to see how it turns out, how it shapes out, what Marines think of this. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to Task and Purpose First Squad. I'm going to get better at doing these long-winded talks, and I'll get more prepared. But I won't be able to do that without your comments and feedback. So please let me know if there's a few thoughts on how this could be done better, because that's how we shaped the content on the other channel. And so I'm curious to know what you guys think.